Aloha! Good morning to all of you from beautiful Mesa area of Gold Canyon, where Per and I are living now for 6 months each year.
Aloha to all. Yes, we just love it here. Lots of mesquite trees, cactus and quails and the coyotes. Occasionally we see bunny rabbits hop by. It's very pretty and peaceful.
We have a lot to say to you today about transfusion from the Tao of Earth. She's very much wanting each of you to realize that realization is purely physical this cycle, that the dimensions above you are unconscious and they're opposites, and they're not really something to engage with unless you want to draw something very dark towards you or into your life stream of dreaming. We wish to avoid that because we don't want you to have an accident or a weird odyssey of experiences that you really don't need to have as you transfuse in light. The extremes and the polarities, which are too close to humanity, have become an obtuse issue for the Tao of the planet, and the choice was made within the last 24 days to simply shut it down or squelch it, so that it no longer has an aspect of issue above you that you could accidentally transfuse into, and in the ignition of it in light, then you end up in this dark airstream. Changes in light and healing the body become miraculous in transfusion. So in our gear that we are bringing in for you today is a very sacred substance that creates a wall or a barrier or a film or a mirror if you wish, or something like a plate of glass between you and whatever lies above. Thus, what's there now is muted and not active, so it doesn't motion anymore as another dream of you and opposite to what you know in the physical. But even so, we want to create a block or a haze or a system that doesn't allow you to engage with that which is above you. The new gear that we're bringing in is similar in relation to you and others, that the you of you should be mirrored back to you, and the you of them should be mirrored back to them. The encasing of transfusion gates that we're bringing in have a lot to do with keeping you in the center of you, in the love of you, in the peace of you, in the joy of you, and in light stream, and not necessarily gray matter light. We're going to speak a little bit about gray matter light because it is coming up from the planetary circumference. As the runner goes out into the world and watches a lot of people transfuse in gray matter light, and they don't know how to somehow separate from the gray stream that's showing up on the surface of the planet. Underneath you and underneath your subtle body, you have a sun, and the sun is getting a preventative mechanism to allow you to see to draw to you gray matter light. We feel that's very important at this point because gray matter light is such a discordant truth to the biology of you. It's like light that scratches. It scratches the infrastructure of the exterior of the cells, and then they start to lose their membrane. If that occurs, they start to die off, and that could occur potentially en masse, and we really don't want that to be. And so we're going to say to you today that it is beautiful to transfuse into non-gray matter light. That's a repose for you to remember as you get up that you're going to transfuse in pure light or rainbow light and not gray matter light. And let the gray matter light fold outside of your gate circumference. Focus is everything in light. Today, the new gates have come in for you within maybe the last 8 hours. If you were up and active, you may have felt it some, and you may still feel a little dizzy or a little uncomfortable, and we bless you. Don't allow yourself to be there, maybe not for the moment, until you get reconstructed or reconfigured into your own circumference of new gate system. As a runner and pair are kind of going through it too, and will tell you, "Ooh, this feels a little odd," but we know that there's lots of changes and we need to just let go and surrender to them. So let's take a deep breath, each one of you that are listening now or into the future, and let go. Let's take a few breaths, inhale and exhale, and inhale and exhale. And one more time, inhale and exhale. Sometimes when you're going through a major change, the breath is very useful to syncopate a rhythm through which you grow into where you're heading and what you're trying to take flight into in this field of yours. Now these gates are just dated to be akin to the region that you are living. If you're living in a straight gate region, your gates will look like a box or a long tube of a box around you, and it will sit in the sun underneath your subtle body's feet, and it will go up what seems like endless, except that somewhere above is that piece of glass or that mirror to keep you from transfusing into what might be a now muted unconscious of you or someone else. Because sometimes the unconscious of people gets a little bit intermixed too through time, and that's not helpful to you or anybody really to transfuse into your unconscious, let alone anybody else's. If you're in a region where the gates arc, and this is true in Hawaii, Australia, and here in Mesa, where Pear and Acerana are. Many regions do arc, then your gates will look more like a waistline. They'll swerve in and swerve out, and all the same it will allow you to flourish more because the land you're living on, if they have arc gates, likes to blossom on top of itself, so you can blossom better in arc gate systems than in straight gate systems. If that's how your region produces them, and unfortunately we can't choose what kind of gates that you live within, they are generated by the land in support of the light motion of the planet. Some regions harbor straight gates. For those of you in Singapore, it's like that, and also in Germany and Iceland in Europe, as well as Idaho in the US, are very straight gate oriented. The arc gates in Mesa are more akin to Hawaii, where the land flowers and the cactus smile and the birds coo. It's very sweet here. In straight gate regions, however, you tend to transfuse more tersely, and that's one gift of a straight gate region. There's going to be bigger uplift and a bigger sense of being energized, perhaps to a point where sleeping the night is sometimes difficult. If you're prone to having difficulty sleeping at night as you transfuse in a gated region that's straight, we recommend a nice big dose of valerian root about 10 or 11 o'clock at night to let your body rest some, because the body gets worn out if it keeps transfusing and not being able to sleep or access its deeper memory banks of your own psyche. See, when you go way deep asleep, you get into the part of the psyche that's wounded, that you need to repair while you rest. If you can't get there because you're awake all the time at night, it's important to create at least one night every 4 nights where you can go under. And if you have to take a large dose of valerian root tincture or pill to get yourself to rest, then we would advise that you try to do that for the sake of your own psyche repair and mending, which happens when you're deep asleep. The new gates you're receiving in straight gate regions may be more tears than they were before, and that's how you infuse the body with light, is in a tears loft. The light comes up under the subtle body, feet, and tailbone, and then comes into the physical feet and tailbone. Your body light infuses around all the cells as you transfuse. And then as you rest at night and you dim your transfusion sum, your Tao and Tao will come in to allow what is uneven in the transfusion to be light infused. So thou observe if the liver, the kidneys, the spleen, the lungs, and some part of the body is under infused. And thou give it a dose of light and then turn up your gear a little bit, maybe around 2 or 3 a.m. and see if it's motioning more evenly, and then turn it down again to add a little bit more light before you get up in the morning. Sometimes when they turn down your gates, then finally you rest if you do a big dose of valerian root. The spine will relax a little bit more and you're more likely to go under in your mind, which is very, very important for those of you in straight gated regions. For those of you in arc gated regions, resting at night is less difficult and may not require the valerian root at all, because in the arc, and when it slows down, usually after about 10 p.m., you will naturally kind of extinguish the motions in the cortex by 11 p.m. or midnight. That's because there's less flower motion going on above you in your own gate, in which case now the mind can simmer down, the spine can simmer down, and you can sleep for 4 to 6 to even 8 hours in some cases. If you go out longer, don't worry about it, because there's always healing to accomplish when you sleep or rest that you don't know about necessarily when you're awake. We want to tell you about 2 things going on in the seed system gear of transfusion. Transfusion is a beautiful system of light that you are orienting yourself within, and it will renew and revive your body like you cannot believe. Your body will be triggering a full regrowth, and this is something we'll speak to a little bit later on in this session, because a full regrowth means a lot of things in you in terms of what you eat or feed the body to make sure that it all regrows from head to toe as it should. Because much like you were age 12 trying to mature the physical body, the action of light will trigger the human growth hormone to begin to emerge, so you've got human growth hormone flowing in your blood, which is going to trigger anything that's wounded, first of all, to revive itself or regrow. Second thing that happens if there are things that have aged that will revive next than if the body determines, and generally this is so for anybody over about age 45, that you've aged a little too much, it will trigger an absolute regrowth. That is sincere transfusion in action. So if you're over 45, you may be going through a full body regrowth. Now, Asheron and Per went through one of these beginning about 3 years ago, and it started with the bones. So it starts with the bones, and you need a lot of liquid minerals and zeolite or fulvic acids to allow the bones to regrow and mature. The spine and nerves may also begin a growth cycle if this is the case. For those of you with weak nerves or weak bones or wherever you're weak, these areas will always be tended to first as you enter another octave where it's time to regrow your form or regrow what's wounded. Next, the major organ groups regrow kidneys, liver, spleen, pancreas, and eventually the lungs and the heart and the circulatory system and the lymph system. Now, when these things all choose to regrow, you won't even believe the dead tissue that it releases if you're over age 45 to 50. I mean, it can fill your whole waste management system with one large loop of something that smells simply because it was dead, and you're not going to be dead anymore. So embrace those divine changes and smells and turn on the fan in the bathroom. We tease you some because we know how that goes. We knew how it went with Asheron and Per. In any case, once the major organ groups finished their regrowth cycle, then you start to tend to the muscular structure and the ligaments. That's when your body maybe needs some protein than you're ever consumed because all of a sudden it's huge protein masses that may be detrimented even in light and then have to regrow. Being pure vegan, Per and Asheron went through it and ate lots of protein such as tofu and peanut butter, a variety of nuts such as hazelnuts, almonds, cashew. They drank a lot of soy milk and other non-dairy milk. They also consumed lots of legumes such as lentils, beans, peas. For those of you who are not yet vegetarian or vegan, then you can consume fish about 4 times a week until something in the spine and the hips and the cortex have been regrown and the need for vast amount of protein is no longer necessary. So if you're triggering a full body regrowth over 45 or 50, understand that this is how it works. When you're tending to a particular organ, it is perhaps useful to give that organ the herbs that are helpful to healing it. So as the liver regrows, it's good to give your liver herbs or the spleen or the kidneys or the lungs and so on. And if you do it right, you have a nice herbal medicine cabinet when you're through. Asarana does have an article online of all the herbs that were useful to the regrowth of her body, and she mapped them in clusters of 3. I think it was in the Growing the Light Wave DNA system of, 1818 Gateway or Pathway of Mastery, because that's what you're mastering is the 1818 Pathway of Transfusion. Now, what does that mean? Well, it means you molder light, and it means if you have a problem, then you molder more light. And it means if you have a really big problem, then you fill yourself with so much light that the problem goes away because light illuminates darkness. You're on a planet of darkness, and in a planet of darkness, the problems surface because you let darkness enter your transfusion gear. What happens when darkness enters your transfusion gear? Well, usually they climb in through what is called a gate. Gates open and close, so angels can come in to repair your transfusion systems. Angels come in to repair your subtle body, to repair your transfusion body, which you know is all through the physical cellular structure, right? And you have a large transfusion body that goes over the subtle body too. Therefore, the angels come in and out to recast and repair these. Generally, they wait until nighttime when you're resting to do their repairs, but there's also reality gates that you enter in and out of when you share realities with others. So here you are at home and you have your home reality, and your home should be your sacred space. So let's make your home a sacred space reality that is one reality where you reside. If you have a twin or someone that is a beloved to you that lives here with you, then that's their reality too. But they still have their own space that is their own reality within the reality that you share. Now, if you're living with others that you don't want to share realities with, it may be useful to put them into their own reality gate and outside of your reality as you transfuse. If you have a space in the house that's yours, a bedroom or wherever it is, an in-law apartment or however that works, then you want to claim that space your reality and not theirs. And that gives you a space to escape whatever it is that may go on in that jurisdiction of their reality, not yours. Not yours means that that's not a space you go into as you transfuse. So you want to put the space that you don't want to go into a not yours. Now don't make that the kitchen of a shared house if you cook. Don't make it any space that you share because you need to be in that reality too. So in your own home, you can just claim the whole thing your reality. If you're twins or have partnership, you can claim it as you each have your own reality in the house, and you have a shared reality wherever you like to share things, perhaps in bed, perhaps on the couch, perhaps in the kitchen if you cook together. I don't know what your biorhythms do for you, but that's how you do it if you're a pair. If you're with family, well, then you want your reality in your room, and you have your reality in every room you share. So if you cook, it's there. If it's in the living area, it's there. If it's in the dining area, it's there. But the other people that share your house, they're in the reality of themselves and not you in all of these common areas. So if you put your family or your roommate or your friend in their own reality in the same shared space, and then you don't sit in their gates or their darkness or their problems, okay? And if they're transfusing, they need to be in their own reality too. So that's great if you're living with older people that don't transfuse, or people that don't know how to motion light. Then they sit in a sound-based reality. You can define the house. Okay, they use these areas that has a sound-based reality. I don't enter it. I'm in my light-based reality everywhere I need to be, and they don't interchange. They don't dovetail in gates. There's no need to share space. There's no need to share realities with anyone. Now the same is true at the office if you're working, that you're in your reality wherever in the office you roam, and everybody else is in their reality. If they're in a sound-based reality, leave them in a sound-based reality. If they're transfusing light in the emerging light cycle, leave them in their own transfusion systems, and don't adjoin their transfusion here. Here we're going to tell you about the nature of transfusion in this cycle. People are starting to transfuse, and all the little kids are under age 9 in most cases, where there's major light gates on the planet, and some and minor light gates, and in time they'll all be transfusing under age 9 and probably up through about age 20 in time. Even the young mindset development people in their teens and 20s may be transfusing because they came in wanting to light orient. They went to Chateau Systems and said, okay, I want a light-oriented transfusion, Shakhtar system, and he gave it to them freely in many regions where there are light gates. So the young people are starting to model light, and they zoom, and sometimes they think in poetry. They think in self-awareness because that's part of Shakhtar's transfusion system. Bless Shakhtar, he's re-emerging as a strong force to try to undo gargoyle problems on the planet. He's like a steamroller in himself right now, coming in, going, oh my God, I got gate problems over here and here and here, and I have to fix them. If he's in your area and fixing gates, help him please, because then he loves you, and then you get some other support for perhaps things you weren't anticipating in this life of yours. It's important to love all spirit, whoever they are, wherever they come from, and whatever they're attempting to do, unless, of course, they're forces of the dark, in which case you want to close their gates and let them go somewhere else. If you're really gifted, you close their gates all the way out of your house and out of your region and out of wherever they stuck their gate open, and let it go sink somewhere else. That's what we are going to suggest you do today, okay? Take the dark gates of what we call Lucifer and Satan, and these characters are just programs. Shakhtar has a program for human dreaming, and he's trying to inaugurate a light system program for those of you that need support, and there's been a lot of problems with that. Now we have Victorio, who is an invention of the causal tau of the planet, who comes in like a heap and storm. He's beautiful, and he'll tell you all about yourself and where you're really messed up. As you go to sleep at night, he'll be there like a hammer on your door nail that you never really wanted, to let you know what you need to transfuse through to be better in your daytime light of you, and not some sick place you really aren't enjoying in life anyway. If your dreams aren't working, he'll reinvent you to dream better. That's one of his gifts, and some of you have even recently found new jobs as a result of his endeavors on your behalf. So bless Victorio. He is a program, but he is lucid and alive and filled with resources, so they're not just a machine. If you treat him like a machine, he will swat you. So don't swat back at Victorio. He's a very funny character, but if you offend him, watch out. That's all I can tell you. He's not going to take any mug from anybody, and I don't blame him, as it's painful sometimes to sit with people who aren't gracious, kind, and care and sway and love him and everything else. And that's where you want to emerge, is into loving everything, because is the only place to go in light that works. This is not about, oh, okay, well, you can or you can't. No, it's really an issue of you have to, because light responds to love and care and brightens and illuminates and heals the body, heals the dream, heals the mind, and heals everything around you. If you can't get to that place of loving everything, you're going to have some pretty ill dreams drawn to you. So remember to love, bless, caress, and sway with spirit first. Sway with Tao and Tao is an important part of your transfusion gear. Now we're going to speak about swaying within transfusion gear a little bit because it is a very personal kind of issue, okay? Your Taos and Taos build your sways. Some sways spiral or go in circles. In gated regions that are rectangular, you're going to tend to sway in spirals more than waves. In gated regions that arc, you wave up and down as you sway, or you go back and forth, kind of like in a swing. In any case, however you sway is very personal because there are many sway paths, and some sway paths are absolutely amazing in their formations, and they can go up and down and around a whole region. Hawaii was notorious for its sway paths when Asarana lived there, and you could literally go up and down the coast of Waikiki from Diamond Head all the way to, I think, a northern part of the island. I can't remember the name of it now, but any case, the sway would go up and down and you could just motion with it all along the sea. You could expand out over the sea and be in absolute bliss as you transfused, because the ozone and the oxygen coming off the sea and of the air just felt absolutely nurturing unto her body. Seascapes are amazing places to transfuse, and if you're lucky enough to live near one of these, we bless you because most of us don't. Asarana and Pear are currently living in Gold Canyon, Arizona. They divide their time here and alter Norway. Even though they're living in the desert. But the desert, interestingly enough, has sways similar to the ocean. The red dirt here and the pink sand seem to produce a gas that is ionic, kind of like your pink salt lamps, which are good to fill your home with, by the way, because they let you sway easier. Have at least one Himalayan salt lamp per room and make sure it glows, and you will ionize your home and you will sway a little better. For those of you inland, pine trees can ionize things and sway, but they tend to sway in spirals. If you can imagine it spiraling up the bark of the tree until it pops out the top and moves something called density out of the land and up into the air. That's how trees help cleanse the land. Pine trees are beautiful for that. Cactus unfortunately don't cleanse anything, so you can't expect them to move anything out their prickly pears or whatever they got growing on them, and Asarana's thinking about that now. But in this region we have mesquite trees and they fluff things. Mesquite trees fluff things. So do most trees that are not green year round. The ones that lose their leaves and grow them in the spring fluff light, but they don't really purify light. So if you need to purify light upon the land that you live, plant a few pine trees and let the other trees that are perennial flush the light around the land. In your home, you could have a small pine tree, and there are the cooked pine trees from Hawaii that they often sell that are very soft and gentle as you feel them, as you feel their pine needles. And they tend to grow top heavy if you keep growing them in the house because that's the nature of the pines. They planted them for their strong bark that could be used as a mast of a sailboat. If the mast broke, then they would plant these things and use them as a new mast to sail away from the island chain of everything. They were relatively fast growing, and within a few years you had a full pine tree. In the tropics of the islands, which grow everything faster and bigger anyway than most other places. Anyway, if you need a tree in your home that's going to cleanse your environment, get a little cook pine and have several of them. Put one in the bedroom. That's very useful for you. It's interesting because trees work together as a void. So even though your little pine trees are in the home, suddenly the void of the cooked pines or other pine trees absorb the density from around you that you're transfusing or diffusing out of you. They carry them off somewhere else out of the landscape of your reality, which is very useful. There are other trees that are very useful to have in the house in relation to transfusion gases. Palm trees are very gifted at producing gases that help your transfusion at home, so a palm tree in the house is helpful. The other one that Asarana used to love very much, that is very prevalent within the Hawaiian Islands, and now she can't remember the name of it. Oh yeah, thank you, Pear. They are ficus trees. Ficus trees are very beautiful and they fluff light very kindly. We have one associate who just discovered that in the terrace gates of Idaho, generally they died because it was just way too much light for the ficus tree leaves and their membranes to live. So all her little ficus trees died, and she didn't buy new ones. She bought something else. Now, in arc-gated regions, ficus trees may flourish very kindly in your home and provide the right gases for arc gates, like they did in the Hawaiian Islands, where they grew big and strong and beautiful. So plants can help or augment transfusion at home or at work. You probably won't have one in your car, and don't worry about that anyway, because in the car you're in the great outdoors and you're going to absorb the gases from the trees and plants and everything that naturally grows around you anyway. Home can get very sticky without ions in transfusion, which is why we recommend the Himalayan salt lamps. But there's also mechanical ionizers that are very gracious at producing a huge blast of ions that can be very cleansing for the mind and the spirit too. So don't hesitate to get yourself a beautiful ionizer or an air purifier for your bedroom in particular, because you're there breathing or snoring or doing whatever you do as you rest. That's a time to clear your spirit and mind, and the angels that come in to recast your transfusion systems will appreciate the ions there perhaps more than you realize, because it helps them cleanse too in an area or a region of domain that's filled with gray matter light. If you're living in a home with a cement foundation, or if you're living in an apartment building or condos with cement, the cement naturally creates gray matter light. That is true with your driveway or garage or the roadways around you. Therefore, the best thing to do is to infuse light into your home or office from grassy spaces. If you're on the golf course, you would infuse it off the grass of the golf course. If you're somewhere near pine trees or other kinds of trees, you infuse the light from out in nature and not from the roadway or from the foundation of your home. So we're going to rebuild your infused systems to connect potentially to a beautiful landscape somewhere within maybe a mile circumference from where you live, and to give you very gracious light that's non-gray matter coming into your transfusion system at home. We'll build one of these for you at work or wherever you frequent and have to stay for any length of time too. So worry not about that. Transfusing light from the forests of you or from the valleys with the wildflowers of you is one incantation all of itself. Now we're going to go over here and look at another picture that Asarana wants to share with you. This is a river at the entrance of beautiful Yellowstone National Park in the US from the west entrance point, and we call it the River of Forever because in the River of Forever there is abundant light that you can draw upon to transfuse and be beautiful in you. There are some rivers, if you're near waterways, that offer light. There are some rivers that diffuse, and we'll explain the difference. Now you kind of see when you look at this river, like a river of light running along the back side around this area here. You're actually seeing the camera actually caught the river of light in the river of forever in Yellowstone. Years ago, Asarana used to come here and drive through and sometimes stop to look at the buffalo or deer and a pit stop up ahead of a parking lot. She would sit and just inhale and inhale and inhale light until she burst the bubble of whatever it was that was sitting on top of her, because critters like to come and sit on top of people who transfuse. Now, Asarana has been transfusing for almost 10 years, and she started as a gracious gift as a Tao in Hawaii who said, well, if you transfuse, your events will be a little easier. She's still not really sure about all of that today, but it started quite a while ago for her due to Hawaiian theory, which is that some people transfuse. Hawaiians generally transfuse, and unfortunately sometimes they eat a lot of the wrong foods and get very heavy and very sticky in their light, and later on suffered from heart attacks or other conditions that are difficult, such as diabetes. Many of you who love Hawaii may remember Israel Kamaka Vivo Ole, the famous singer that everybody still hears the music from if you attune to the Hawaiian station on the radio. On the internet radio Pandora, you hear a lot of Easy's music, and go there, he's beautiful. He was a transfusing mega man. He was over 700 pounds big. Eat way too much poi, rice, fish and everything he could feed his face with. That was the very wrong thing to do for a transfusion life of any length at all, and he died at 38 of a massive heart attack. But his music lives on, and he's known as the Big Hawaiian Man. He, like most Hawaiians, just don't get it. You can't eat porky pig, rice, poi, and taro, and the starches, and transfuse and not create weight problems for yourself. Now, some biologies are better than others. You can eat your starches and it seems to balance out your water ratios. And where you have to be considerate about starches is the blood. So if the blood's thin, then you're okay with your starches. If you're thinner, it helps you perhaps hold a little water retention around you so you don't look like a stick. It's emaciated, and maybe that's helpful But if the blood goes thick, then you have to give them up anyway and go to more enzyme diet to keep the blood thin so you don't make yourself sick and die by 38 as you transfuse, or however old you will be if you get too heavy. If you're gaining body fat, it's a very big sign that you are eating the wrong foods or that your thyroid has a major problem. If the thyroid has a major problem and you're gaining weight, then you need to go on the herbs that will help absorb the thyroid misproduction of not enough thyroxine or whatever the hormone is called in the current medical system of reality that you're tuned to. And so we're going to tell you about thyroid imbalances and transfusion, and it may or may not be an issue of tiredness because as you transfuse, the nerves are stimulated and you hip hop around potentially, okay? That's just the nature of transfusion. But if the body is tired and the thyroid is not producing enough thyroxine, the body may start to gain weight or enlarge itself when it really should thin down. We're going to tell you about what to do about that if that starts to occur for you. One is to forget consuming starches for a time unless you have an abdominal condition that needs starches to help balance out the acids that the stomach produces, because you don't want ulcers either. The second thing to do is to choose more, but the third thing to do is to go on an herb called rhodiola, which will trigger the thyroid gland to revive and renew itself. Rhodiola isn't a bad thing to take daily for stamina if you need to, along with ginseng and hoodia, and another herb that Astarana has recently remembered called guarana. That comes from Brazil. Guarana causes the spine to cease to invert in a part of its firing, so it fires all up evenly from the base of the spine to the cortex, allowing for more of a sense of liveliness or energy in her day-to-day transfusion. So those 4 herbs are very helpful, and you can take small amounts of them daily and probably not suffer from it if in particular you have a tendency to be tired or weak by 6 or 7 p.m. Now, on the other hand, if you're one of those that's up all night, these herbs may not really be helpful to you too much, and you have to distinguish between which ones work and which ones don't. If they enliven you so much you can't sleep, guarana in particular may keep you up at night, as can rhodiola, ginseng less so, and hoodia less so. So if you tend to be awake at night for stamina, the ginseng and hoodia herbs are probably better for you overall in this time of emergent transfusion. So at this time, I want you to fill yourself with light from a river of light that the angels are identifying within perhaps a few miles of where you live. And when you think about it, you should fill with the river of light in your transfusion systems, and it will start to cleanse the gates that surround you. Cleansing the gates is a whole other issue, and it needs to occur several times a day and not just when you think of it, maybe in the morning, or maybe you think of it not at all. So remember periodically during the day to tap into the river of light and fill your gates and fill your transfusion systems. Pump them up with light until the things that are starting to collect along the gates or hook into your transfusion system simply disappear. If you know of a place of a river of light like this and you're not feeling well, go drive to the park or wherever it is and sit there for 10 minutes to a half an hour. Pump yourself filled with light and let whatever is like clinging to you or causing you problems or whatever it is that has grown to be here in this day or way of you to simply pop away. Get over whatever the issue is that's related to the darkness that sticks to you. In the next webinar, we're going to talk about light wave DNA programming that cause dark and sticky things to stick to you. We won't go there today, but let's just say that the light wave DNA you're growing into still has programming from your ancestors. Some of that programming is negative and is also positive. So the programming is both positive and negative. When you add more light from the river of light, you throw yourself in the positive loop of the programming of your light wave DNA until you can realize beyond it into something else called self. Self lies beyond programming and thinks differently than the programs of your light wave ancestry. So that's all we have to say about it. If you find yourself being very negative as you transfuse, you're in a negative loop of programming. It's nothing more than that. Pump yourself full of light. Flip yourself over into the positive side of the programming and have a better day. I think that's helpful, don't you? Okay, now we're going to go on to another picture here. After you pump yourself with light, you want to do something else. This is a transfusion river, and Asarana pulled this up and was looking at it, and she felt all this stuff release. The transfusion river just pulls off everything that you don't need anymore after you pump yourself full of light. And each of you have some place that can diffuse like this, and sometimes it's a river. This is another part of Yellowstone and tours Lake Yellowstone. It probably feeds out of Lake Yellowstone, and it was an excuse river. Every time Per and Asarana drove around the park, they would stop here at this little spot and infused and popped themselves in light stream to get rid of what was dark. Then they came and diffused the density out of their own gear, because your gear always collects density, because you're rising up octaves as you transfuse. Octaves are layers of light that accumulate around the planet that look like an onion, and as you transfuse, you go up through octaves. Each octave you go up produces density you have to diffuse. And if you don't diffuse, you end up pumped with matter that you really don't need to be attempting to hold on to anymore. Diffusion usually occurs big at night. The Tao comes in and has systems that will show up through gates to diffuse you heavy duty at certain times and certain octaves of your transfusion. When that hits, you will not be able to remain awake, or you may sleep for hours dead as a doornail and wake up barely being able to crawl out of bed to get to the bathroom. Hopefully you haven't lost anything along the way, but that's major doubt diffusion. They do it periodically because if you transfuse heavily, you need to diffuse heavily the density that you're holding onto. Often, about twice per month, you're going to have a major diffuse dump with your Tao. In times of heavy duty rising through gear, or where you do a major transfusion feat through octaves that are perhaps particularly stinky, and your Tao says, "We're just putting your tennis shoes on now. We're going to get above these octaves because they smell and I can't stand it, and the angels can't stand it. None of us can stand it. You stink, we all stink. Let's go." You get on your tennis shoes and you molder and you zoom and you bloom out the other end. Hopefully it's no more than a day or two, but we've seen some associates rise through things that took a week, and when they flipped out the other end, they all went, "Ah," because the angels could breathe again and the associates could rest. Then they needed a major diffuse exfuse. Let it all go. Let the density go out of the body that they couldn't exhale. As you put your tennis shoes on and transfuse to rise up through icky, sticky, mucky octaves. Out in the countryside, it's clear like here in Yellowstone. There weren't as many murky octaves. Asarana drove here one year when she was having a lot of vision problems, and a lot of her vision problems were murky octaves in Idaho at the time that she was living there temporarily, that had not been cleansed by the land yet. Then she drove into Yellowstone and suddenly could see perfectly clearly. And then she realized that it wasn't as much an eye condition that she was in an area of murky octaves. Of course, she wanted to move, and Spirit said, "No, we need you here for other purposes." Sometimes Spirit and Tao and Tao are like that. They need you there. Eventually, she rose above all the murky octaves, and then her vision cleared too for what was there stagnant in the region in its gray matter. Gray matter can show up in any octave. So if suddenly your vision goes blurry and your eyes are really not giving you trouble at home, if you can read even with reading glasses, then your eyes are probably okay. If you go into gray matter, suddenly this scenery looks murky. And there was a time it was so murky in Idaho that Asarana couldn't see literally a block ahead while driving down the street. What she would do is paint up the scenery or transfigure it on top of the gray matter so she could make sure she didn't hit somebody. She could see the car, she could see the building, she could see the stoplight. This was important if she could see the gas station when it was coming up to be filled. And so she would transfigure the scenery over the gray haze so that she could see it well enough not to get into an accident. And that is a true gal of our hearts, isn't she? She figured these things out thanks to Tao and Tao, and at that time, Jaskantar. As Sarana and Pear's cross-age twin flame in Light Wave 8, We Dream of Atlantis, said, "You better transfigure the scenery or you're going to hit someone. We don't want that to happen to you." Now, that's a very unusual condition of ill light, and some of you may find in time that you're in that kind of ill light where you live. We don't know exactly how or why it occurs. What happens is the gray matter lifts to a particular octave and stays there in that layer, and it may be 6 months or more. It was almost a year and a half before Asarana had transfused through all the gray matter that had collected there, through time from other light eras. And the visionary accord of the region was very murky. And so this can be for anywhere where there has been light exfused and exposed that's occurred in another time, even in the last 200 to 400 years. So be aware of it and learn to transfigure your scenery up if your vision suddenly goes blurry and you're driving down the highway of yourself. So that's all we can say about that. Eventually the land diffuses that, and then the region clears up, and that's what happened in Idaho. Asera and Pear are now out in what we call the Mesa, which is Gold Canyon, Arizona's very lucidly clear light systems of scenery, and that's very beautiful change from their experience in Idaho. So we're going to take you to another picture here. This is an ego of her heart. When Pear and Asarana used to travel through Yellowstone, all the animals would come out and pose because the planetary tau and the woolly mammoths were with them. And they said, well, you're going to get scenery pictures that are going to tell you something, and one day they're going to tell your audience and webinar something too. You also write posts around these too. Now, this ego mom, I think, is sitting on with her young ones. But anyway, the message was to transfuse up into the sky of yourself and not down into the ground of the murk of everyone else. So that was one of ego's messages that day. The other was to stay high in the clouds where the air and the scenery and everything is clear and not in the dander of the resort, because Asarana and Pear were staying at a resort in Big Sky, Montana, and here they were in Yellowstone because it was getting murky around the resort due to human conferences and everything that people come and do there. She was noticing that the trees around the resort were starting to die and the pine needle, and that was very sad. Ego said, we'll stay high in the sky and none of it will bother you. So she did through the duration of their resort stay, and that helped a lot. And so we're going to say that to any of you that are living in the cityscape or the suburbscape of any region that may be outside of a major city, and here in the Mesa, as Sarana realizes, not far away as a mini Los Angeles called Phoenix, with its palm trees and whatever it is, and it's pretty dense. Therefore, if she has to traverse into town to shop or wherever she's going, she transfuses high into the sky of herself and stays on top of it like a boat in the water and feels okay about her day. So let's transfuse up into the sky of yourself and not down into the ground of everyone else, okay? Now, it's habitual to try to anchor because you were all sending people that said, oh, ground into the center of earth. Let's do that. Let's ground. Well, if you do that and you transfuse, you end up transfusing a lot of muck up from the land around you. And it's really not a wise idea. In those days, you just feel slow. You feel like you can't crawl out of bed. You don't know how you're going to get from here to there. On the other hand, it seems okay, but now your nerves ache, you got aches and pains in your body, and you don't understand what the heck is going on. You're probably not transfusing high enough and in the sky of yourself. So pull your transfusion way up, 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 and breathe the fresh light and the clean air of the sky above you. Let go of the need to believe in this thing called grounding, okay? Which was an ascension issue and sound to keep you anchored in your body. It doesn't work with light at all. As a matter of fact, in light, you kind of float sometimes in and out of the circumference of your subtle body. But your small transfusion body should be anchored around the form. This can be a problem too for those of you suddenly transfusing high in the sky of yourself, and suddenly your transfusion head is a foot above your physical head, and your eyes go blurry too. Now they go blurry because your transfusion head is not seated around your physical head. So when you transfuse high in the sky, you don't move your transfusion body up. You keep that seated properly around your head to your toes and your arms and everything else, because that is where the light needs to go, is in your cells and not somewhere else. Now Asarana had the hardest time with this to begin with. As the big gates opened in Idaho, and suddenly she was like 2 feet above herself. She was walking down the street and she can't feel her feet. She feels like a piece of rubber, and her nerves and her hips were swaying to and fro. She thought that was kind of cool, and Spirit didn't. They said you got to get back around your transfusion body, and it took quite a bit of an adjustment to finally get her seated in that big gate system, big gate system around the physical. And it never really was right 24 hours a day. Here in the mesa with the arc gates, it's much easier to keep the small transfusion body seated around the physical body. So if you feel disoriented in your vision, or your vision is going blurry, then you need to reseat your transfusion body around physical if you're in a major gate region that motions like tiercely up and up and up, like up you're like flying. As Serena drove to Bryce, she went to regions like this, and it was beautiful. It's like, wow, this is just like Idaho when it was pure and clear, except that her transfusion body wasn't around her body anymore. And she had to drive and be safe, so they put it back around her and kind of pushed it back down. And then she was better with her vision and with her capacity to drive too. You can, with focus, bring your transfusion body down around you. So if it's north or south, if it's under you, you want to bring it into the center point of your eyes. Your eyes are the main thing to focus on for the small transfusion body to align. And that's what Ego said to her that day too, is align your eyes and you always see clearly what you need to see, not only physically, but in your mind or whatever is going on in the psychosis of your group, okay? In the unconscious, group dynamics are psychotic, and you know this too wherever you work or whoever you work around or with. There is an unconscious psychosis that's been there forever in sound. In light, it goes away because now we're hyperventilating. The psychosis of the unconscious to cease to move, and that is a relief for Asarana and Pair. And it could be a relief for you, except that the people you're around may or may not be transfusing yet, in which case their unconscious is alive and well and just as psychotic as ever. What do you do about the psychotic unconscious of another that hammers at you or does whatever it does over the course of your day or night, or whatever it is that you spend time with these individuals when you encounter them? Well, one thing Asarana has learned to do is take the unconscious and pin it somewhere else, like not in the restaurant you're having dinner with your friend, and not in the home if they're visiting, and not anywhere near you, preferably somewhere else. She's going to make sure to pin her new neighbors in their home, in their unconscious, and not let their unconscious invade her beautiful mansion of self and all these things that you grow around yourself in light. So if you have neighbors, pin their unconscious in their home and not in your home. If you have family, pin their unconscious in their bedrooms and not in the rest of the house. And perhaps that will help you if they're not moldering light yet. If you have a roommate and she's transfusing, her unconscious is dormant. If she's not and he's not, then you need to pin their unconscious in their bedroom and nowhere else, maybe in the shared habitat of life that you're living in. Then you'll be less disturbed by the psychosis of humanity wherever you are. Now, if you work in a shop and people are in and out, pin their unconscious to their cars if you don't know where their home is, and that generally works. Then you'll be less troubled if you're having to engage with a lot of people, some of which may be transfusing, but many of which may be sound-oriented elders or older people, and that can include people even in their 30s that are not choosing to model light this cycle yet. Why they wouldn't is hard to say, except that it's a doubt issue, okay? So if they're doubtless, they may not have turned on their light sequences yet. If you're a doubt person and doubt people show up around you anywhere that you are, you may be invited to help them doubt infused. And we bless you to do that, because the more people that transfuse, the less psychotic the unconscious of your region will be. So it's good to doubt infuse younger people under 50 or 55 and let them begin to transfuse and renew and revive as you are if you're a little older too. We'll speak to you about how the revival occurs now. Once you get your transfusion body where it's supposed to be, and this was Ego's last message from this encounter in nature when the warden drove by, and Per rolls down the window and he says, "You shouldn't park here. This is a private place for eagles to nest." And so they had to drive off, and as the runner is saying, "But we're blessing the eagle." Of course, the sheriff wouldn't think that, so they had to drive off. Eagle said as they drove off, "Remember to renew yourselves in light, and if you remember to renew and revive each time you transfuse, and when your transfusion body is in your body and not somewhere else and not in someone else's body." Because that was her problem at the time. At that time, is her transfusion body would end up in somebody else's body in the Dreamtime Ascension School or DAS event, renewing and reviving them. And they magnetized it over this one particular individual that's not in the school anymore and actually left that year. So you don't want somebody else also magnetizing your little transfusion body over them to renew or revive either. Therefore, if you find it's missing over the course of the day, then you need to bring it back and make sure that your cells are reviving and not somebody else's, okay? So that's the last message of ego. Now, as you focus on the small transfusion body, you can fill it with beautiful pink light. I recommend pink light because pink renews every cell and reminds it wants to live, be healthy, and be beautiful, and love and care for you first. For this beautiful body of yours, this beautiful body that your Tao grew in the womb of your mother from a seed egg of information in archaeology and anthology that knows how to motion light. Many of you may have motion light and had transfusion bodies when you were younger. Perhaps you try to start it up again at 14 as you hit puberty, and then everything around you massacred it because they didn't want people running light yet. Some people are very strange, and sometimes they like to massacre transfusion bodies or massacre transfusion systems and fold them with demons and other interplay that is really unkind. If it shocks you enough, you may have a spinal condition of nerve pain that can grow in other parts of the body, or as Asarna experienced, if you get shocked enough, you can have a swollen ankle or a wrist or shoulder, and that can be uncomfortable too when the nerves swell due to shock, which comes from people trying to mow down your transfusion gates. Now, in some regions, the big transfusion gate is so strong that it's very difficult to actually cause, in which case people do better. If the gates aren't very big, gates folding or not running evenly can occur pretty recurrently. The best thing to do is to call in angels to repair them for you if they're personal. Your personal angels need to show up to repair your personal gates. If your gates fold or your gates fall on top of you, chances are you're extremely tired for that given day until the gates are unfolded and then resurrected, reconstituted, and put back together and start to transfuse. If there's a major gate mishap, then your gates may motion light but probably less efficiently. So over time it leads to low wattage transfusion if there's a gate mishap until the gates are actually fixed in your region. The best thing to do is to not interfere with the angels' work wherever they're repairing gates. They have certain sequences in ways they need to do it, and you can't really do it for them because you're a human. You can't even really fix your own gates because you won't know how to weave it. It's a very fine weaving of a light thread that creates the gates, that creates the transfusion bodies, that creates the transfusion body of your subtle body, and you can't really do that yourself. It is not the same as ethereal grid work that you might have known in ascension that ran through the body. Your ethereal grid work left, and a small transfusion body was woven to run around every cell. It looks just like you, only it's light fabric. So probably over 2 years ago. And so you don't have that kind of ethereal structure anymore. So what do you have in place of that? You have a small transfusion body that runs through your physical vessel. Then you have about a foot out from you is the sub-ethereal, that is an area that is a void, okay? This is a void that your Tao and Tao access to nurture, to witness, to guide you, and to help dream with you. Now this area can get damaged, and we witnessed that in our Bryce Canyon DAS event. For those of you that came, most of you had cracked sub-ethereal regions, and we brought in an instrument and extracted what it cracked into it so that it could be more like a sponge, so that Tao and Tao can more readily come in and out to help you. What's cracking sub-ethereals appear to be a form of gargoyle that doesn't know any better, and Per got so tired of this because it's happened 8 times in the last year and a half that he set up a mechanism to literally shove the blow back at the gargoyle so it would break apart instead. This seems to be working, and so whatever wants to break apart your sub-ethereal, it's best to action it back like immediately and not let that region of domain crack, because void is sometimes more difficult to repair than the gates themselves or the transfusion bodies which motion light. Void does not motion light. Void is an open space to which you can commune and feel the oneness, sometimes with nature, sometimes with your Tao and Tao, with the Tao and Tao of the land or the landscape, or the Tao and Tao of the sky. That is where you get beautiful sense of oneness and communion, and if the void has been cracked around you, you may lose that sense of oneness until it's repaired. And so if that's what you're suffering from and you don't feel expanded to connect to things, understand that your sub-ethereal is cracked, and the Tao of the planet will bring in an instrument to help that repair now. Some of you who didn't adventure to join us at the Bryce Dreamtime event perhaps tremendously cracked, in which case you have many things thrown into the void of the sub-ethereal. That's not good for you or anybody else, because you can't perhaps even hear your Tao or Tao for guidance if it's true. So we like that to mean for each of you tuning to this webinar today. Beyond the 1 foot, sub-ethereal begins your ethereal body. Now, your ethereal body is not your subtle body. It is underneath your subtle body, and it can be as large as 4 to 6 feet beyond the 1 foot of sub-ethereal that encompasses your ethereal structure. Your ethereal structure doesn't transfuse. It is there as a protective layer of a fabric that emulates you as an ethereal human. So it looks like you, and it will transfigure a light glaze over it to produce hair, eyes, and skin, and shoes and clothes, if you know how to. As Sarana learned how to transfigure her ethereal into this amazingly gracious one, like female, with long hair braided to her knee, and all these pretty hairdos and bobs and bows, and glimmery clothes, and beautiful face with makeup and all this stuff, thanks to a Tao from off planet who said, "I'll teach you how to transfigure yourself." And so she wanted to give you transfigurative lessons. We are going to set those up for you so your ethereal can look beautiful to Tao and Tao, as well as spirit and angel too. Now you can just transfigure light over your small transfusion body, and it can give yourself a beautiful hair treatment and conditioner. It can give you makeup. It can make your skin renew and beautiful. You can transfigure your clothes on top of what you're wearing to sparkle perhaps in the colors that they weave or shine. You can even clean spots with light. She's at the airport and drops coffee on her white pants, and Jaskantar rushes in and says, "Well, just like transfuse it up until the stain goes away," and it did. No more stain removers for Asarana. We'll use light instead. Has she been able to do that since Jaskantar left? Well, not as easily, but she tries. So don't feel bad if it doesn't exactly work in her experience. The Atlanteans were very gifted at that kind of thing, and Asarana is an Atlantean seed and not an Atlantean human. Unfortunately for her, and maybe for you too, we would have rather been born in their cycle than this crazy psychotic cycle of human non-interest in care or love or much of anything else. Now we're going to change our pictures here to something else that we have in mind. This is some trees in a beautiful Tambourine Mountain botanical garden in the Blue Mountain area of Australia. The trees say to her, transfusing all the colors of you, don't limit yourself to the hues that you think are pretty because sometimes hues of auburn or sage. They use the word sage, which is kind of a silver gray if you think of the sage plant. Can be very useful to your heart, your mind, and your abdomen if you have indigestion. On that day, she may have had some indigestion due to whatever she was eating that maybe she shouldn't have called cabbage from the night before. Cabbage is one of those foods that if you transfuse, you really shouldn't eat because it just irritates the gut. So if you like cabbage of any kind, whether it's cooked or not, or stir fry or not, don't do that. There's one other food we highly recommend you don't eat, and it's called cauliflower because it can irritate the interior of the gut in light to a huge degree. Pear made this mashed potato and cauliflower once and then threw most of it out, realizing it wasn't good for their abdomen either. Foods that have noxious gases can be a problem, but some on the other hand, like broccoli and asparagus, can actually be very useful for the mind or the heart, and they don't irritate the abdomen. But the message is when you transfuse the body, you want to fill it with those colors that are helpful to its health and well-being. If the region of the body is cold, so if your stomach is running cold, or your pancreas or liver or kidneys or spleen or heart or lungs, and you want to fill it with infrared or an auburn color to warm it up, and so you just ask that your angels do that for whatever organ, gland, or system is running cold. So when we transfuse some parts of the body, just don't catch on to evening out the body temperature very well. Now, on the other hand, there are those places that are just hot, 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 and they are so warm you don't want to add infrared. You want to add a cool blue or a sea blue, or those areas that tend to run too hot inside of your physical structure. As you add the blue, that starts to balance out your body temperature as you transfuse. Those are the two best colors. We've tried yellow, we've tried green, we've tried different things with those of you that received Babaji's new transfusion body, which was a beautiful gift of his. But by and large, infrared and blue are the two colors you can remember that help keep the body temperature stable. Infrared for what's running cold, and blue for what's running hot. And if it's the right temperature, leave it alone and you'll be better for it in the end, okay? Blood needs ley lines of pink running through it to remind it to feel cared for. The blood of the body needs love, so we are going to have the angels line the transfusion body with an artery system with pink ley lines. The lymph, on the other hand, generally needs to cool down so that it stays fluid and needs pale blue ley lines. So we're going to have the angels do that through your small transfusion body today. Remember to be healthy and remember to bless the body and caress the body and love it every day. If you're feeling unwell, to pump yourself up with light and diffuse what's negative and take flight into something that really delights rather than sitting there in your misery. Remember to feed the body what it needs to retain its health or growth cycles into light wave DNA, and remember to be at peace. We're going to add a peace serum today to your small transfusion body, and this is not a color per se. Serums don't have colors. They're more like a liquid substance that just gives you the flavor of angelic peace. Peace is important to you to be well, but also to your body to feel well or feel relaxed or feel as though it can do what it's here to do in this lifespan of yours. So we bless you with a peace serum for your small transfusion body. There are serums that may be granted to you if you explain to your angels how you're feeling at night. They may be able to bring something in that helps you overcome emotional strife of what is called negative self and negative light wave DNA programming, because they all go together as you transfuse. And so let me explain that too. Now we're going to go to another fun little picture here. These are our two pelicans. As I say everywhere Asura and Pear went, nature would stop and pose, and this is another example of pose of nature. These pelicans are waiting for trout to jump up over the waves so they can gobble them up and swallow them whole. Pear and Asarana were standing by the edge of the river and could see the rainbow trout gathering up, and lo and behold, they were slithering up the side of the river instead of jumping over the waves. And so the pelicans had nothing to catch that day, but they posed for Asarana and Pear nonetheless, to let them know to be as one as two, because then you're better off as you transfuse. Now we bring this message to say that it's better for the two of them to transfuse together because they're twin flame. But it's not necessarily true for you if you're in partnership or with family or with anyone else. Do not transfuse as one is our lucid suggestion here, because transfusion systems need to be adjusted to your unique light wave DNA, your unique body temperature, and your unique transfusion gate. If you transfuse together, one will overheat and the other will be fine. So you don't want to transfuse in anybody else's gate, and that's our point here with these pelicans. Now, Animals transfuse as clusters. Clusters of deer, clusters of pelicans, or clusters of birds. Clusters of trees even transfuse together in the landscape. Valleys transfuse as one giant system. So do lakes, rivers, streams, and oceans. Oceans sometimes transfuses as one system for up to 800 nautical miles, and that's fine for them. Probably wouldn't be fine for the whales underneath either if they transfuse as one clan, and they don't. They do it individually because they know each body needs its own system, its own temperature monitoring, its own transfusion revival system, its own light wave DNA. The light wave DNA archives finally opened in Iceland a few years ago, and we opened another set in Bryce Canyon. If you're in need of new light wave DNA organization from the Tao of the planet, it will be organized now, and that includes perhaps a new future DNA system that you're going to emerge into in a year that's healthier in its program, okay? Because some went and inaugurated light wave DNA with kind of sick programming built in. If you're one of those that perhaps don't feel so well, a lot of times each week, you may have transfused into sick programming and light wave DNA that isn't really well in the ontology of yourself. If you've done that and you felt unwell or you continue to feel unwell, it's time to bring in another light wave DNA with better or more positive programming for you to grow and transfuse into. And so we will organize that for you today. For those that attended the Bryce Dreamtime event, you received this while you were there, but we will cross-check that it's still with you. Light wave DNA can be harvested, and sometimes the light wave kids are very good at this. So what we decided to do was bring in new DNA scapes for them, unmasked wherever they were transfusing, from Bryce and Iceland, since we knew where the archives were, so they could pick and choose the best light wave DNA for themselves through age 9, and we're going to open it up to the ones through age about 25 soon, so that everybody can have wonderful light wave DNA to transfuse into that's related to a broad bandwidth of ontology related to their archaeology, okay? Now you're an egg. You have your DNA related to the egg, and this is what we want to share with you. For those that are cis, you don't want the DNA maybe from Iceland or from Bryce. You want the DNA from your egg because that may be better DNA for you to transfuse into, but perhaps not. And so we've been looking at it because sometimes not a whole complete set of archives were administered to the egg because they expected it in Atlantean society, where you as a star seed were supposed to be born and you ended up here. And the light wave DNA isn't with you either because it's back in Atlantis 12,000 years ago and you can't access it. Jaskin Todd tried to bring in new DNA for Astronaut Impair and succeeded some, and that was kind of entertaining to him somehow. He's a very beautiful light wave human that used to transit gates in time and visit with them some. He's not with us anymore because those gates Some have closed and they're not available here anymore, but that was an amazing experience to meet your cross-age twin. Per and Sarana loved him dearly always. He was an amazing man. Anyway, in all this, we want to say that sometimes the X DNA is not the most positive programming you could motion into. The archives from Atlantis were opened in Iceland. Those embraces are more from the Anasazi reign of time period, where they were a very gracious civilization of native people that loved the land and loved one another. When they saw the dream of white people invading everything and things going south, they decided to not procreate and depart the planet at that time. So their genealogy ran out. Anasazi lightweight systems are very beautiful and in their own way very succinct at delivering a particular type of programming. Asarana tried on a group of their gear and really likes it. This is Castaneda land in Mesa. For those of you that are going to adventure to be here, it's pure transfigurative knowing of how to use light to not only make yourself beautiful, but maybe make things come and go or disappear or do other fun things in time and space. Maybe normally others never knew about except that character, Castaneda, who lived near Taos somewhere. He had access to all those Anasazi archives and had fun with it in his lifespan too, and you can too. So the Anasazi light DNA may be helpful to you, and don't not look at it even if you've drawn upon yourself Atlantean DNA that seems to be okay. Because if you're not feeling well about yourself and you're hitting a lot of negative airstream due to negative programming in the light wave DNA that you have gone into, then it's time to change that out and do something else. This is not a cycle to try to purify negativity, but Atlantis was because of the light was so fierce they could take negativity in DNA and clarify it. And then the DNA changed its format. The kids coming in with that DNA next built more beautiful bodies with a grander sense of the self for themselves. And that was their project, but it isn't yours, because if you go into that DNA now with gray matter airstream and it triggers the negativity to arise and you to feel blue or depressed or cry or not know where to go with your life or your mind, and that's very difficult DNA in this type of light stream. So we suggest a more positive Anasazi light wave DNA maybe as an alternative if you've been feeling tremendously blue. Now for those of you from Asia, there is also a light wave DNA path from the Tibetan system that's in the Himalayas, and it is also available to you from 2 anthologies. Some of you who are Caucasian and have an anthology to Buddha may find that Buddha's stream of light wave DNA is very, very beautiful for you to think about transfusing into. Per does have that anthology because he's a direct descendant of Buddha, even though he's born white in this lifetime. His brother, on the other hand, does not have an anthology to Buddha. So some do and some don't, and you can't really choose a DNA just because you want it. I'm sorry it doesn't work that way because it has to grow on top of the DNA you own, and you own it. You were born with it, and you have to go where it can flourish. Something about the Anasazi DNA can grow on an infrastructure of ontology that felt close to the native ancestry in the land. We are witnessing that not only for Asarana but some others of you that felt it even in other parts of the world or felt deeply nurtured by their Hawaiian ancestors or the native ancestors that show up in the Ascension Insight series of writing. Therefore, if you had a deep connection to the ancestors, you may try the Anasazi lightweight DNA and see if there's a match, and if you can grow in that direction from a positive airstream and program. In the next webinar, we'll teach you how to deprogram negative programming that's lightweight DNA oriented so that you can get over it if there's no other DNA to grow into that's any more positive. And that may happen, we don't know. This is an experiment in a way, and the kids coming up are trying on all kinds of things and seeing where it will grow or won't grow. So they're kind of mapping something that's for another generation ahead, and perhaps not themselves, and perhaps not yourselves. Bless them if you have children in your lifespan too, because they're really going all out there to try to do their very best to give birth to an emerging light wave culture, and not one prone to determine to kill itself or wound itself or go to war. They're very, very determined because their futures are very much at stake, maybe more than yours, especially those of you perhaps in your 50s or 60s. So be well with the DNA you are growing into, and you learn to deprogram what's negative. And one of the best techniques is to begin with is just to fill yourself with more light, which should pop the programming over into its positive airstream. All lightweight programming has positive and negative attributes built into one single system. So if there's a negative airstream, there's a positive on the other side. And if you boost yourself in light, you flip over to that part of the programming and feel a lot better day to day until you have figured out another way to motion out of light wave programming and into self of yourself, which is the whole point of transfusion. So we're going to get to that here in a minute here. Now we're going to go one more time here to our prose. The whole point of transfusion is to be in light wave sway, to motion and grace, to flow unto a live stream that causes inspiration and your imagination, to think of something you want to dream and then go do it, and have a wonderful tomorrow that delights you and put you in beauty and all that wonderful stuff, and all this positive stuff from Shatar. And you read it and you go, that's very nice, but where is it? Like, where's the meal? What is it about all these beautiful prose that just don't seem to grow, as Shatar would say? We're going to begin some webinars with short talks through the general public and for you too about a lot of things like the pros, knows your light motion. And he says, well, a positive pros is to trigger the positive side of your light wave DNA program, and you transfigure into that and fill yourself with light. You feel a little better in your sway and your day and all that good stuff. However, it doesn't work for most of you yet because there seems to be something severely missing between your mind and written words and light. Now we're doing webinars because when you hear my voice, you actually foster this. So let's read this prose to you so you can transfigure into this, okay? The transfusion of you is a light wave sway that triggers divine grace to flow unto your live stream, causing inspiration and your imagination to take flight to foster your tomorrow in beauty and delight. And of course, shatters. Prose always rhyme and chime, and twinkle and twitter and sway and sparkle. Asarana used to love writing his prose and still does each time they come through, and they're meant for you to read out loud perhaps because maybe just reading them silently doesn't do anything for you. So they're still online somewhere in all those articles and essays, and if there are ones that work for you, then read them and see if it causes the positive side of your programming to emerge for the day. Light was always voice activated, although the Atlanteans liked to read, but they learned to create little devices that would read a book out loud, and there are devices like that available now. So you could go put your written pages out to a little device, it will read it, and hopefully some nice feminine or masculine voice that doesn't irritate your ears too much. Perhaps you get something more out of it in light motion than you do otherwise. Asarana has written many articles for Baba on love, Babaji on mindfulness, and from other sources through the years. Perhaps if you get a reading device to read it out loud, it might be very helpful to support your light wave sway and transfusion. I'm not sure, but you can think about that. I think there are even systems that do that in a little device, and you just pull up the page or whatever it is, and it goes through it and reads it out loud, but they may be costly. But whatever it is, we're trying to speak to you so that you grasp voice ignition in light, because it's the voice that causes light to transfigure. So when I say to transfigure yourself, beautiful, transfigure yourself into sweetness, transfigure yourself to sway with your Tao and Tao, and those that sway and grace and love and care. Transfigure yourself to love, transfigure yourself to be at peace, transfigure yourself to inspire yourself to figure out what you want to do in this life that thrills you, that makes you feel like you're going to be fulfilled and in the joy of everything that you do. Transfigure the dream of your home into a sacred space. Transfigure the dream of your work into a place of grace where people get along. Transfigure your partnership into one of joy, beauty, and love, and care sway. Transfigure your friendship into soul family, and transfigure your life into something beautiful in light and not something ugly. Let go of the negative programming of your light wave DNA as you can. Now, light wave DNA programming can take 9 months to release one single program. It's not a small transfusion project, and we'll work on that more in the next webinar to explain what that means or how that will help you. But for now, fill yourself with light and transfigure yourself with beautiful words. We used to tell Asarana as she went to the bathroom each morning to transfigure herself beautiful and sweet, because in the sweetness, spirit and angels and everything descends to play around you. And as you transfigure yourself into more light and sweetness, the other things that are even odorous to spirit go away. We talked to you about not eating certain foods that really irritate spirit, like garlic, onions, cabbage, and cauliflower, to name a few. And if you eat more fruit, often that creates a sweeter scent or aroma of gas that spirit is also attracted to. So eat your fruit. It's better for the enzymes of your blood and your digestion too. Stay away from sugar, because sugar doesn't create a beautiful odor to spirit, but fructose does. Transfuse in beauty and grace, and that's all I, as Shatar, have to say. The Tao wants to teach you one more thing before we end this webinar, and it has to do with flushing your gates. Every 4 to 6 days, the gates need to flush of everything that's accumulated to the outside or inside of it, because the inside and outside and even the interior is kind of magnetized to draw into it not just gray matter, but things that may be flying around the house or around the landscape or around the workspace or around any other environment you go shop or eat or be in that isn't well with your ethereal body or your small transfusion body, okay? If we don't pick these little things up, they act like nails or they act like spikes that then injure the outside of your ethereal body. If that keeps cracking or getting injured or isn't repaired, ultimately you end up diseased as you continue to transfuse for another 2 to 4 to 6 years. Each of you are receiving an assessment about your ethereal skin today, and if it's pitted or has little things that have hooked into it, they may peel 1 or 2 or 3 layers to allow it to regrow, and resprout. All the little things that get hooked into your transfusion gate needs to be pushed about every 4 to 6 days. And the way that occurs is you turn the gate inside out, upside down, and put the exterior into the interior, and that will flush everything out of it down a diffusion system that goes to be most underground. We're going to talk to you a little bit about exfuse or diffuse, as well as inhale and transfuse. So you inhale light into your gate, and then you transfuse it and purify yourself and purify your dreams into one of grace. As you transfuse the muck and the mire of the molecular structure or even the ethereal, which is rising up octaves, and even the subtle body needs to diffuse what's dark, you don't want to throw this at somebody else because that injures them, and some people are in a sad habit of taking their exfuse and exfusing it on top of everybody else, of somebody else. Now I'll tell you about this from Pierre's personal experience, because what hit him while we were temporarily living in Idaho for 5 months was a group of people that exfused and exhaled and threw mulch at him until he couldn't move off the couch. That was gross, and those people really had no right to do that, and they have since lost their privilege of transfusing maybe ever again, because you don't do that to another. It hurts. What you exfuse or exhale needs to go into the ground to your Tao to be mulched and recycled. Why would you want to recycle your density? Well, that's you, okay? That's a part of the self of you, and what you mulch, that's of you, gets recycled into new self striations that form in your subtle body. The self of you is a weaving of fabric in the subtle body that is outside of the ethereal body. So you have the ethereal body that ends about 7 feet away from you, and beyond that is your subtle body and self, and your subtle body and self extend another good 20 feet from there. So all told, your field is over 50 feet wide, okay? And then your transfusion gates are outside of that. You don't have a transfusion gate near the body. You never would want one. Don't build one. We removed a couple last night. We were shocked that it was being done that way. That can be very injurious to the temperatures of the body. The transfusion gate should be all the way out, and it motions light, and you syncopate a rhythm that's even between your small transfusion body, your etheric body and your subtle body and yourself. It motions together in a syncopated rhythm. You may do it in a waltz of 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, whereas the subtle body you do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 because it's bigger, but it's still in an even motion. That motions light up and up and up together. So light should motion up, and if it doesn't motion up and it swings down, you're going to get tired. So light should go up, and also the nerves of the body should fire up and not down or backwards. If the nerves of the body are firing upwards, you're going to feel weak or unable to stand or need to lay down and go take a rest. The nerves of the body, and in particular the spine, should fire from the tailbone to the neck and into the cortex and not the other way around. If you're weak, the spine is probably firing down, and that's not a good thing to do in transfusion ever. And sometimes there are programs that can cause that within light wave DNA. Sometimes there are mechanisms that can enter the transfusion system that don't belong there that cause an inversion of your nerves. Your nerves should syncopate an upward, outward rhythm. So it goes up the spine and out each nerve to every organ, gland, system, fingers, toes, wherever the nerves go. One device that helps the nerve syncopate a rhythm that motions properly is the little RSG radionic device that you can order online if you wish one. If your nerves are misfiring, then put the RSG on for an hour and a half, and your nerves will straighten out in motion in the correct direction to retain your health, your consciousness, your longevity, and your stamina. Perhaps many of you using them realize how beautiful they are in teaching your nerves to motion right, and you are transitioning from sound to light. Sound had a way of keeping your nerves motioning in the correct direction, and sometimes when you let go of that system and start to run light, the nerves get confused. That's neither right or wrong. The other way that you can get to the nerves to motion right is to go take a swim, or take a walk, or ride your bike, or get in a bath. The bath will often cause the nerves to motion right within about 10 minutes. If it's hot, take a cool bath. If it's cold, take a hot bath. But if your nerves are really messed up and in a lot of pain, take an ice cold bath for 10 minutes and then get out and warm up, and your nerves will reset. That's an ancient therapy. Some hot springs have hot and cold baths, so you can get between the hot and cold. Getting in the cold water causes the nerves to absolutely shut off for 2 to 4 minutes and then reset. As they reset, it will resyncopate out of your aches and pains, and that's where the cold baths may be useful to some of you that are having nerve conditions also show up in transfusion. Nerves can shed their skin, and that can cause the body pain and misfiring. The RSG, or the cold baths, will trigger the nerves to shed their dying skin and rig new ones, and that's helpful. There are also herbs you can take that will help the nerves revive, one of which is guarana, which we spoke to will help revive the spine. Another is kudzu, Kudzu, that will cause the nerve to create new synapses wherever they're misfiring or failing through time. And the last one is dried photokaki, or dried persimmon, which is from Japan. That's very useful to provide the right salts and potassium levels to the interior of the nerves. So you can consider those 3 herbs if you've got nerve conditions of aches and pains, adding to your herbal concoctions for a time until everything regrows in light wave DNA. Regrowing the nerves and light wave DNA is a process, and sometimes there are parts of the body that are terribly scarred in the nervous system. Scars sometimes are hard to revive without added nutrition or something like the RSG device or motions in a pool to get it to even out so that the body can find a way to revive the space that has guard. There are few humans that are born without nervous system scars. They happen in the womb of your mother long ago, and they revive very well on a substance known as azea that Pear has been taken for over a year now. And that seems to be taking care of scars he previously couldn't revive in both his spine and in his neck, and now also in his ankle. So for those of you that have aches and pains, azea is probably a substance to go on to revive the scars in the nerves that maybe you were even born with. In the transfusion system, the nerves also have a light line that's in the small transfusion body, and we're going to end this session with a new light line up the spine and out the main nerves to the major organs and down the legs and down the arms and up into the center of the cortex. The light line of your small transfusion body related to the spine should only motion bright white light. Firelight white is best because it's full spectrum and because nerves are best with bright white light. Now, one of the other problems in transfusion today is all the yellow light coming up from the infrastructure of the mother-son dream. The yellow light in nerves is going to create spasms. So some of you that are having aches and pains, it may well be that you're trying to run yellow light up your spine or up your major nerves in the body, and that's not good. So change it to bright white light and create a filter of some sort for the yellow light that's blaring throughout the transfusion system of the planet, and see if your nerves don't condition themselves to be well and lessen pain in the years ahead for each of you. Transfusion is a blessing and a gift to renewal and revival of the body. Whereas the spine likes white light, the small transfusion body should run pink light to heal itself, to nurture the cells into wellness, and even to augment the change of the DNA to another striation of something that works better with light and what you have in the structure as of today. Now the DNA steps down into the small transfusion body and then inaugurates a change first in the RNA and second in the DNA, and pink light triggers the RNA and DNA to absorb the new light wave DNA structure. If you don't run enough pink, the DNA may not grow all the way into the physical, and then your body may revive unevenly, leading to disease later on in certain organs, glands, or systems. So remember to run pink light every day or as you think of it into the body, and white light in your spine and nerves and cortex, and see if this doesn't lead to overall health and growth into beautiful new light wave DNA as you transfuse. Remember to fill yourself with white light so you trigger the positive programming of your light wave DNA. Remember that light wave DNA programming is to be left behind so you can emerge more into the consciousness of the self of you rather than a biological program of personification of you. Transfusion allows you to rise above personification. What is personification? Well, it's a program that makes you act this way or that way, or say this or saying that, or be this or be that. That isn't the self of you. So as you become the self of you, you leave behind the programming that causes personification and express something else that your anthology or archaeology understood and is wisdom about life, about truth, about health, or about anything else you can think of. And in the self of you, Tao and Tao may also enter the airstream and communicate not only to you but to others if you are in the role such as asarana of teaching or counseling. So whatever you're doing, the whole goal of this business of transfusion is to rise into becoming the self of you and not necessarily a programmed personification of a human moldering light. As you become the self of you, something else unfolds that's more beautiful in the dreams you might actualize with your Tao and Tao, and that's the path of realization. Seas and star seas you can realize into the self of you. Others who have broken anthologies may or may not be able to accomplish that now or any time ahead. They may remain a light wave program of personification of their light wave DNA even into their old age. And that's sad, and it's hard to understand what needs to be done to repair the anthologies that fragmented. Although we're sad about that, it may have happened in galaxies and creations far away, and perhaps can't heal here upon earth. We've attempted it in other time periods, and generally it failed. But for you as a seed, you have an opportunity to realize something else other than the programming in your light wave DNA. That's what we wished for you, and that's why we produced these series of webinars to trigger your path to unfold into a new direction, a new tomorrow for you to love and enjoy and take flight within in you, okay? I believe we say everything we want to say today about transfusion. Remember to flush your gates every 4 to 6 days. Remember to fill yourself with light, triggering more positive programming to arise until you motion into yourself more graciously. Remember to transfuse the small body and pink for the cells and white for the spine and nerves. Remember to also keep your small transfusion body aligned with the physical and not over someone else or in some air space or ground space that doesn't work for you. And remember to keep the gates closed to realities that are not for you and allow the gates to open to your angels and other forces such as Baba, Babaji, and Ananda that are light wave programs about love and care space, soul family, and light emotion. There are programs like Shatar. They are conscious, they are lucid, they are there for you to attune to understand you, understand light, understand soul family, understand yourself in this lifespan, in this life of yours too. And there's always Shatar, and he's an amazing character that understands the dreaming of you. And now there's Victorio that provides analysis of light wave programming so you can learn to release what you need to in order to grow into the self of you. Please bless all these resources and love them always. Bless your Tao and Tao and the Tao and Tao of earth. Be gracious with the angels and be sweet to them too, and your life will unfold into a new day where you are you in the beauty of you. Namaste.